A huge warm welcome to today's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. Today, the podcast is one. I can't believe it's been a whole year since we started. So with that, we're doing a live episode today. So I'll stop talking and let's get into it. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to this live episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Alex Rosborough, who is an alumni guest of Game of Leadership. So welcome back, Alex.
Thanks for putting up with me again, Paula.
Well, let's just say it can't have been that terrible then for either of us if we're going for it again. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Paula. We had a really interesting conversation last time, so no doubt it's going to be even more interesting this time, considering it's the first birthday of the podcast, right?
Well, this is it. So, first and foremost, happy birthday to Game of Leadership. It's our first birthday. I have to say, when I started this, did I think I'd reach a year on? I'm not convinced I did, Alex. It was all a bit sort of, well, let's just see how it goes.
That's what life's about, though, right? You know, just taking that leap, just see how it goes, taking risks. And yeah, it seems like the risk paid off. So big congratulations to you, Paula. That's it's a true testament to your character and your ability to just keep pushing on and making it happen. So yeah, well done to you.
Oh, thanks so much, Alex. And, I have to say I've had a lot of cheerleaders, a lot of awesome listeners sharing their thoughts and insights along the way. And, lovely testimonials as to how much they appreciate the podcast, what it's done for them, help support them in their leadership, the choices they make around how they lead themselves, how they lead others, how they choose to lead their business or within the organizations that they work. And honestly, it's been such a blessing for me and such a learning experience talking to all these amazing guests that have popped up over the last year. If I think right back to the sort of founding guests that I had, Jodie Salt, Amy Avagan, and then, right up to the latest, I nearly mentioned somebody that hasn't been released yet, so I'll hold my thoughts on those. But yourself, Alex, I had Natalie May on recently, Lauren Hughes, who else? There's so many that have been on that I'm so grateful to for having shared their unique take on leadership. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And this whole idea of game and leadership, it sparks all sorts of weird and wonderful thoughts in people. And especially recently, a few more saying, oh, no, game and leadership shouldn't be in the same sentence, which, is really, really interesting. Because actually, for me, when I think of that sort of those political office games and that kind of thing, I totally agree. Game and leadership, forget it for me. If people are playing a bit of a nasty game behind the scenes for their own gain and they don't mind who they step on, or care rather who they step on to get ahead for themselves, then that's where games within leadership start to go down the wrong path for me. So it's just been fascinating hearing all those different takes on leadership and games. But today we are going to have a chat. Obviously we're celebrating, of course we are, but we're going to have a chat about what we think about leadership clones, Alex. And I know you're going to have some fascinating takes on this, because if we think about clone in its simplest form, the most basic form, we're kind of thinking of a clone, an exact copy. And I have to say, over the years, I have seen people, trying to be something, trying to show up as something. And, when you're not showing up as your authentic self in your own leadership, or let's face it, anything in life, it's really hard work, and actually it's quite exhausting. So if I think about that sort of clone piece, what is that, what I've just said there, what's that sparking off for you, Alex?
Couldn't be more true. Couldn't be more true. We're living amongst the time of the clones, right? I feel that where we currently are in terms of society, in terms of the way we communicate, in terms of everything really, the whole dynamics of our culture, we seem to have lost the ability to think critically. And that lack of critical thinking skills leads to people imitating each other, right? Because we can't think for ourselves. So what we do is we see what we desire in others and we imitate. And that leads to exactly what you've just said. Are we being led by clones? Yes, we are, because leaders are imitating bad leaders. Wannabe leaders are imitating bad leaders. And that's led to this whole culture of bad leadership where, to be honest, we don't really see many great leaders today. All we see is people trying to play dictator. And I know, Paula, you feel the same as me about this. That is not leadership. In fact, that's the complete opposite of leadership. But I'll get into that as we discuss this a bit more.
Yeah. Let's not peak too early. We've got, half an hour, 40 minutes, whatever we take.
I feel this conversation might be a little bit controversial, but I feel that's what people want, right? People like to be entertained. People like controversy.
They definitely like to be entertained. And, yes, I do agree that whole sort of pinning your idea of great leadership on something that you're perhaps earlier in your career, you haven't got experience so much. So you're pinning your ideas of what great leadership can be on something that isn't great, but you're not quite aware enough to know it's not great yet. Sometimes, let's face it, people are aware of what they're doing and they are wanting to say, yeah, I can have that too, and I don't care how I get it, and I'll emulate what's happening over there because that looks good to me. Yes, there are those people out there, of course there are. But, I'm always in the camp, and I do say this sometimes, Alex, where I will put on my rose-tinted specs for a minute. I'm going to give myself permission to do that, to say that actually, there are many different leaders that I've come across over the years. And I have to say the truly poor ones, thankfully, are far fewer than the ones that are either don't stand out, they're just doing a, generally consistent good job along the way. But then the ones that really super shine above the rest, where you just go, now that is awesome leadership. And that's what I want to be when I grow up. And trust me, even at my age, I'm still growing up.
I think we always are, right? If we're not continually growing up, then what are we doing? We're stagnating and we're essentially dying. If we're not growing, we're dying, right? So that's a really good attitude to have. The fact that you've been doing this podcast for a year now, it's quite refreshing to hear that the majority of people that you've spoken to have good leadership skills, because as I said, from what I see, it's kind of a different story. I just see poor leadership everywhere. And I just see people imitating that, and it's just creating this pressure cooker of bad leadership that's going to lead to the downfall of a lot of businesses, a lot of people, and it's going to destroy a lot of lives, I feel.
Yeah, well, interesting, Alex, if I think wider to the global stage of, not that I want to have an in-depth discussion about politics at all, but if I just think of a few years ago when we were looking at, Trump in America leading and Boris here, and it was all bumbling along and a bit terrible. And, it's shocking to see that behavior on stage. What also, the bit that gets me is that the people surrounding the likes of a Trump or whoever that leader may be, so this comes right down into organizations as well, whoever that leader may be that is just showing up so poorly at the head, whether that's the CEO, whether it's the president, whether it's the prime minister, whatever it is, that they don't tell them how that's landing, how to guide better, how to be a better person, how to show up just as somebody that people would be proud to follow. That's the bit that feels like it's all been let down for me, I think. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I see some of the most influential leaders, if you want to call them that. Personally, I don't find them influential, but they're put in a position of influence, should we say.
Right.
People like Trump's, Boris Johnson, these kinds of people, they're surrounded by their yes men.
Yeah.
And they just confirm everything that person does. It's like when Boris Johnson, not to get too political, but when they were negotiating peace with Russia, and Boris Johnson went over and pretty much shut down any chance of peace. And he's got all his yes men around him telling him he did the right thing. We're like, really? Blindly walking into World War III, you could have prevented that. Yet, because all your yes men are around you, supporting you because you're the prime minister, that's okay. No, it's not. It's really not. And it's, I see it across the board in business, in politics, religion, media, finance, medicine, you name it. It's everywhere. And I feel that we're at a time now where it's going to reach a point where this can no longer continue, and systems are going to start falling as a result of this bad leadership.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's so interesting that this comes out in leadership runs through everything, and it starts right from when we are young. And people might argue with this, but this is how I see it, right from when we are young, because I even saw it in my daughter as little or as young as 4 years old. She was taking control of situations and being a little tiny mini leader. I'll give you a little example, and I've probably told this story before, but it is really funny. My husband and I were having a heated debate about something. Yeah, Stu and I were having a bit of a feisty chat about something. And Kaylee runs into the room, little 4-year-old, little hands up in the air, and she goes, "Everybody, just calm down." So, do you know what? Even as young as 4 years old, just leading, taking control of the situation, don't like what mum and dad are doing right now, I'm going to stop this. And of course, that totally diffused it. And even to this day, I've no idea what we were arguing. We don't argue very often, but it was just so funny. And that's all I can remember. So the point of sharing that with you all is the fact that our leadership journeys start before we ever even think about it. Because if we aren't leading ourselves, then who is? And, I see it in schools with the school kids where, you want to be cool. So you go over here and do what they like so that you can fit in with this crowd over here, or do what they like so you can fit in with this crowd over here. I have to say, and I didn't even recognize this until recently, Alex, I really didn't do that at school. I had a bit of I quite like that person from that group, and I quite like that person from that group, and made friends with people that I liked. Not because of what group they were in or how cool it was going to be, or, and maybe I was a bit of square for that. I don't know. Square is a really old term, blimey.
Honestly, from the conversations I've had over the years, that's quite a common trait in the world of business. People who tend to follow a path of entrepreneurship and tend to work in the world of business, they are those kind of people. They don't conform to what is considered socially acceptable and normal. They conform to what feels right for them. Which is probably why we all end up going down the road of entrepreneurship in the first place.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was exactly the same, Paula. I didn't have a select group of friends. I had friends that I infiltrated multiple friendship
Yes,
groups.
exactly. Yeah, I was a bit of an infiltrator as well without even knowing it.
Yeah, and it's pretty much all the people in business that I speak with, all my friends, close associates, they're all the same. We all came from a similar mindset as a child. We seen through the BS kind of thing.
Oh, definitely, definitely. We are live, so please do not swear, as they say. But yes, absolutely, seeing through the facade, if you like, as to what's real and what's not, well, what's fake, if you want to talk about it like that,
Yes.
and being able to make those choices. And I talk about this a lot, with clients. We've always got a choice, even when you say, oh, I'm not going to do anything, so I don't have to make a choice. Well, that's a choice in itself. But this choice over here might be super, 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 super hard. But if it feels right, it will be well worth the effort. And this choice over here might be super simple, but it's not right, even though it's easy. So just because you think you've got no choice, there is always a choice, but some of them are super, super difficult to achieve. But when you've achieved it, makes it all the more worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel that that's probably the primary reason we're in the mess we are today in terms of society. Everything's falling apart right in front of us, and it's to do with people just aren't willing to make that difficult decision. They know it's right, but they fear being ridiculed. They fear being different. Everyone wants to fit in. Everyone wants to be accepted, and that's a real issue because, again, everyone, as a result of that, everyone becomes a yes man.
Yeah.
And that leads to exactly what we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast, right? Everything's just going down the pan. I mean, for me personally, I believe leadership is personal leadership. It doesn't begin with personal leadership. It is personal. It is self-leadership, because a true leader, you look at all the greatest leaders throughout history, right? They did not try to lead anyone. They led themselves so well that they inspired others to follow. That's what a true leader does. And then those people who follow them put them in the position of authority to then spread that message on behalf of the people who are following them. That is true leadership. It all begins with self. Now, we're in a time where that doesn't seem to exist anymore. People are trying to lead people, not themselves. And that's when we sit down, you turn on the radio, look online, turn on the TV, and you see, just using him as an example, people like Boris Johnson, who clearly has no ability to lead himself, is an absolute clown, yet he's trying to lead others. And it's like, hang on a minute, this isn't right. Just something doesn't seem right here. Whereas if someone we saw in the same scenario on the TV, on the news, on online, and they were doing absolutely amazing things. Look at Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, people who were the masters of self-leadership. These people were true leaders because people followed them through inspiration, right? And that inspiration then inspired those people to embody the change this person was advocating for. But it's strange that all the real true leaders of the past sort of couple of centuries have all been shut down and ridiculed, right? Persecuted.
Yeah, of course. But there's still the people that still believe and know how good it was. And people like us come back and remind everyone from time to time of all that great experience that we can keep learning from, And I talk about that a lot in terms of, wanting to learn every day, picking up different tips and tricks. As old as I am now on my leadership journey, I'm still learning every day. I meet amazing people, the guests on the podcast, for example, but people in the work that I do. The day that I stop learning, forget it. My growth, I think you mentioned it earlier, it kind of stunts your growth. You stay still, you get stuck, and it's a really horrible feeling. Because don't get me wrong, I've got to certain stages in life and I felt really stuck. But then it takes some sort of catalyst to get you out of that, and generally that comes from within. You know, you'll sort of say, right, that's enough of that. That's enough of that moping round. I'll pick myself up and move forwards again, and off you go again, you know, whatever it might be. And of course, we all have those what I call pivotal or crucible moments in our lives where we do get stuck for a period of time in whatever is going on for us at the moment. But the beauty is all the strength that we find to pull ourselves through those situations, and then being able to come out the other side, having refreshed, having learnt so much from that. And of course, that's why we always have that third episode with our wonderful guests on Game of Leadership talking about their pivotal moments, because they are the bits that really strengthen our leadership as we lead self moving forwards in our lives.
I could not agree more. Yeah, as I said to you earlier, if we're not growing, we're dying, right?
Yeah.
You know, just look at how evolution works. You know, you need to be evolving, otherwise you're not going to survive. And if we're not growing, then not only are we doing ourselves a disservice, we're doing our fellow humanity a disservice, because collectively we must evolve, we must grow in order to survive as a species and thrive. So the moment we stop growing through whatever reason, yeah, we're doing a disservice to the whole of humanity. In my opinion, we need to be growing. That's one of the key purposes of life, in my opinion, to grow, to evolve, to ensure our species becomes stronger and better during the time we spend on this planet.
Yeah, and randomly watched a movie last night from, I think it was 2012, possibly, but might have been earlier than that. And I think it was called Sunshine or Sunlight, I can't remember. And it's a doom and gloom movie, obviously, where we're all going to die if they don't save us. proper one of those catastrophe movie. And you know, the ship that went off to save us by exploding the sun again so that it would reignite and start to warm the earth again was called Icarus. And it just made me think about that sort of leadership of, you know, where it could all potentially stop, but we have to do something about it to get ourselves out of it. So it was just a random thought there about that film last night. It was quite poignant without me even realizing.
Well, do you know what? I feel that that's so true, and it's pretty much where we are now. I don't want to be too doom and gloom. I'm very optimistic of the future. Sorry, dropped my pen. It can be quite the times we're in now, when we see everything just falling apart, and this crazy sort of mentality that seems to be, you know, spreading like wildfire at the moment. It can be quite easy to just say, "Oh my God, we're doomed." But you know, we're in the midst of a cycle that's repeated throughout history. What do they say? Is it hard times create hard people create good times create weak people create hard times, and that's the cycle. And I feel that we're at the stage where the weak people have created the hard times, and these hard times are actually building the strong people now. And as we've said before in the past, Paula, although the leaders that we see on the surface are absolutely terrible, there's this rise of real true leaders at the very bottom that are starting to rise. I mean, you just go on to, you know, LinkedIn, for example. There are some fantastic leaders on there, you know, really inspiring people, leading people through true inspiration. And I feel that we're starting to see the hard times we're in create these tough people, these real strong leaders. And those strong leaders are going to lead us into a time that is absolutely beautiful, that is fair, that makes sense, that's built on logic. And I feel that, you know, we're going to get there. Of course, there's going to be, you know, a lot of destruction in the way. But as long as we stay true to ourselves, nurture that true leadership in ourselves, there's no reason why we can't come out and enjoy this golden age that will come out off the back of this.
Do you know, I've never heard that cycle, but as you were saying it, I was like, oh, I know where this is going. That makes complete sense. And just thank you, Becky, wishing us happy birthday there. Yeah, that's so interesting, Alex, and I think you're absolutely right. The weakness in the sort of global leadership that we've seen recently, but I think there is a tough fight going on in terms of organisations, because perhaps you think I've put my rose tinted specs back on, but either way, I think that we are starting to see the green shoots of some sparkling leadership starting to come through. If I think about, in my own experience of corporate world, the organisation that I was in did a massive shake-up in 2013.
Yeah.
It changed CEO at the end of 2012. 2013 did a massive shake-up, and then has been going, up and up and up ever since. And it's just things like that that give you hope to see that organisations in the main are trying to do the right thing. Yes, we still have the odd rogue, dodgy leader sticking in there somewhere that unfortunately I wish there were more sort of dealing with the issue rather than skating around it, because skating around it means that it's okay to behave like that instead of eliminating that behavior, removing that person, whatever it might be. And I don't pretend to be an employment law expert, but there are some tough laws in place, and it's quite hard to get rid of people when they're either not performing or behaving very badly. Performance obviously is a different issue, but behaving badly in terms of the way they're treating others on the team, or the way they are or not leading, as the case may be. It starts to get tough. But I see that organisations are saying, well, let's go back to the choices I was talking about earlier. We could take the choice to take around the issue. Actually, the right choice is really hard, but let's do that, even though it's really hard. And I'm starting to love that, which is heartening.
Yeah, I agree. Here's a prime example of the way in which I see the real leaders starting to rise. If we go back sort of pre-pandemic, everyone had to conform to a specific narrative of what a business leader should look like. I say business leaders specifically because that's just the world that I come from. This applies to leadership across the board. But before 2020, if you didn't turn up in your suit and your tie and act professional, you were ridiculed. People they wouldn't take you seriously. Now look at some of the best business leaders you see in the world right now. They rock up in their hoodie and their baseball cap and just don't care. And the reason being is because they're coming with true leadership, and they're inspiring people, because it's not about all this facade. It's about what they bring to the table, the skills, their knowledge, their ability to lead, their ability to self-lead and inspire others. That's what it's about. We're starting to move away from this fake corporate persona that has led us for so long. And we're starting to move into the realm of real, true leadership, values, mission, inspiration. These are the things that are starting to rise to the top. And going back to that cycle I was talking about, this is a prime example that we've seen the hard times that we're falling on. They're starting to rise. The tough people are starting to rise to the top. And eventually we're going to come together and create a better world. And that's going to create the good times. And then the cycle will start all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as much as the pandemic brought global heartache and tragedy, I think it also brought some real great changes in terms of the workplace. Yes, entrepreneurial people were already in that space of relaxing a little bit more in terms of the way they look, because you're absolutely right, Alex. It's what we bring to the table that matters. you know, the strategic thinking, the critical thinking, the way we're doing things, our behaviours, etc. Not what we're wearing as we rock up to a meeting. I mean, you know, I'm sure many of you will resonate with the you know, posh top on the top and the sort of panda pajamas on the bottom half and the slippers, you know, during the pandemic. But I think, you know, people are enjoying going back to, or having a hybrid, which is most common, thankfully, because we don't want to lose the fact that we were all so productive working from home during the pandemic. So it's nice that organisations are giving that opportunity to do a bit of both. But people are enjoying going back to the office in a more relaxed attire, because it is more about what they're bringing to the table, the job they're doing, how they behave, how they interact, than what they're wearing. I mean, okay, within reason. You don't want to turn up in your bikini to a board meeting, but you know.
I hope not.
Now that would cause a stir, wouldn't it?
Oh no, I know. Yeah, it's there is a big shift. There is a big shift. And the great thing is you know, going back to the topic of this conversation, are we being led by clones? We are, but I am also seeing these true leaders really changing, sort of kind of forcing these bad leaders to adapt. You know, it only takes a few really good leaders to create a work environment for their employees that everyone else becomes envious of. And when everyone becomes envious of that, they seek change. Oh, well, if these guys at that company can have that kind of freedom to work on their terms and be creative and, you know, work as a team that's full of love and joy and, you know, they work well together, why can't I have that? And then once that switch flicks in their mind, they start looking elsewhere. And then the employer of that person is like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm going to start losing my best talent. I need to start doing what these guys over here are doing if I want to be able to retain my best employees. So they're kind of forced into a situation where they have to be good leaders. And even if they're not good leaders, they're going to be pushed out of that role and someone will take over their job eventually. And I think a lot of these bad leaders know that. And they're trying desperately to adapt. But the problem is a lot of these really bad leaders have been doing it for such a long time that they just can't, you know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, unfortunately. And it's this new generation of leaders I'm seeing who are really sort of leading the way, who are just, you know, there's a lot of great leaders who are of the older generation, but they're kind of less likely to take action on making the change. I see a lot, especially on places like LinkedIn, for example. Oh my God, there are some unbelievable people on there who are really seeking to make the change. And you know, I'm not going to name drop anyone, but no doubt everyone who sees this, if you're on LinkedIn, you will know what I'm talking about. There are young people who are really seeking to make the change and they're forcing it upon these bad leaders. So yes, we are being led by clones, but I feel those clones are being infiltrated by true inspirational leaders.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There are the clones among us, but I'd like to say there are more people shouting louder that are great leaders and wanting to make that change. And I couldn't agree more in terms of LinkedIn, Alex. I'm seeing some spectacular content coming from some really inspirational people that, you know, they won't always necessarily see themselves as a traditional leader, because when we think about the term leadership, it does turn off a lot of entrepreneurial people. You know,
I hate it. You know, I hate the word leadership.
Yeah, exactly. But there in itself is an interesting talking point, right? Because, you know, why do you hate it? What is it about it that makes you hate it? Well, I would you know, wager it's probably to do with the typical bad image of leadership that people have taken from the corporate world. You know, so if you see have you seen Succession? Oh my goodness me. Well, that's, you know, really old school leadership, leading by dictatorship and scaring everybody. You know, the huge lack of psychological safety, all of the siblings are trying to basically be the next CEO when the dad steps down or dies, for want of a better expression. To take over the huge global organisation. And it just, let's just hope that that's far, far less common nowadays. Because when you see it, when you watch it, you just cringe. I mentioned psychological safety there. The fact that none of them can trust one another to say anything without it being misconstrued or used against them or used for someone else to gain, power and a step up over them. It's just horrible place to be. And that's that bit in the game and the leadership I was talking about right back at the beginning, where, that's just the worst place I could imagine being in and having to operate.
Absolutely, it's I think we've lived through the times where that's run rife, and I feel that we're at an end right now. I think the pandemic brought a lot of this to light in terms of people just saw the crap. They just saw through it all. They saw, look, what the hell's going on? And as much as, many of us business people don't really enjoy social media just because of the type of people we are, being forced to use social media to grow our businesses today has created a place where we share lots of information and share lots of knowledge. And that available knowledge, that freedom of sharing knowledge, has allowed people to see leadership for what it actually is. And I think we're just at the beginning of a massive cultural revolution around that, in terms of, not just business, across the board, leadership altogether. Go back 10 years ago, how many people were into self-development? I mean, you look at Tony Robbins when he was selling his cassette tapes, right? All those years ago. Not many people were buying them. Whereas now, Tony Robbins can sell out a 10,000 person event at probably 10 grand a ticket. And he could do it in less than a week, because that personal development side of things is growing. People are becoming more aware of the self. And as people become more aware of the self, they then look to lead themselves. And the more people that lead themselves, the more they inspire others. And the more we inspire each other, the more we're going to see ourselves out of this mess and create a better future working environment and world for each other, I suppose.
No, I really, really get, that really resonates with me too, Alex. I think, the more we're sharing, the more we can share our opinions, our views, our knowledge, our learnings with each other, the better it's going to be. Excuse me, voice is giving up already. That's no good, is it? So the more that we can share with each other, the more we're going to encourage that great leadership of self first, that can then sort of spill over into the other things that we do, the people that we lead, and the businesses and organizations that we lead within. And it's exciting times. I definitely won't ever lose hope that there are good people out there that are making a huge, huge difference. And it is that ripple effect, isn't it? Because if there's one of you, saying what you're saying and spreading good words about what you do and how you see people leading and good behaviors and all of that, that can only, the ripple just gets bigger the further away it goes. And I really love that idea that the things that we do, if I think about physics, is it every action has an equal and opposite reaction? I wasn't very good at physics at school, but I've remembered something.
Yeah, it's the the law of inertia.
That's it, yeah. So, and the energy doesn't ever really go away; it just gets passed on. If you think about things in that way, what we do, every little thing that we do has an impact on something or somebody. So if we can all just think a little bit more in that way, think about what we're doing, want to show up as our best, try our best, come at things with great intent, non-judgment, and wanting to come and support other people, gosh, what a different world it would be if we were all behaving in that way.
I know, right? I'll tell you what, here's something very interesting that I've noticed. If I go back sort of 6, 7 years ago, and talking to businesses, it was all about money and profit. That's the conversation. Because let's be honest, right? That's why we're in business, because we have bills to pay and we need to make money. But there's going to be a point in which, you've got the lifestyle you desire, you've got the money to cover the bills. Then what? Well, up until I would say probably 2020, it was a greed mentality. Let's just hoard. Let's just make as much money as possible, right? And you can still see it on the top level. These big blue chip companies. The Fortune 500s. They're all very still motivated by profit. Why? Because they built their business infrastructure on those principles.
Yes.
But what I've noticed over the past few years when I speak to smaller business owners, and when I say small business owners, I also mean like medium business owners, any sort of business that isn't sort of like a blue chip company. The conversation's all about impact. It's not about profits anymore. And of course, there is a conversation in there about profits and money, because again, that's why we're in business. Business is there to make money. We've got to pay each other. We've got to create a means of providing for our families, right? We've got to do that. But it's primarily based around impact and value. How can I best create value that makes a big impact on the world? And that, to me, is a clear demonstration of the world we're in. People are moving away from this consumer mentality, this concept of money, which doesn't actually exist. It's just completely fabricated. And they're moving more towards the idea of impact. How many lives can I change? How much impact can I create? Because I can't remember who said it. It was a great philosopher. He said that the majority of people on Earth spend their entire life working to create an expensive tomb full of fine art, gold and jewelry. And that's exactly what most people do. They spend their whole lives working to create this big tomb with 20 bedrooms and 15 bathrooms full of gold and jewelry that they're going to essentially die in. Whereas now people are starting to see through that and thinking, hang on a minute. When I come to my judgment day, if you want to call it that, and I sit there and say, do you know what? I might not be a multi-billionaire. I might not have a big mansion in the hills full of fine art and jewelry. But you know what I did do? I impacted millions of people's lives. And this planet is much better now by me being on it. Yeah. Now that when it comes to judgment day, you can say that to yourself. Oh, you're gonna move on to the next life with a big smile on your face and feeling very, very happy. And I think that's what people start to realize now. And business is moving away from a means to generate revenue to more of a means to impact lives. And that right there is absolutely beautiful.
I love that, Alex. That's just giving me goosebumps, that has. I think you're absolutely right. Impacting others, supporting others, helping others, whatever way you want to look at it, and making that ripple effect really matter. Whatever it is that you're doing, make it meaningful, and just be the best that you can in the leadership of self, of others, of the business or the organization that you're in, and you're on to a winner. Because as you say, at Judgment Day, wouldn't it be lovely to look back and be really, really proud of what we've achieved and how we went about doing it? And that's the important bit, isn't it? In terms of our behaviors, the values that we hold true in our core. How did we align with them along the way? Did we really show up for ourselves and others?
Absolutely. And here's why true leadership is important when it comes to impact, right? You can create massive impact on your own with your business, your team. And, you drop that massive rock in the pond and you create a huge ripple effect, which is great. But where the real magic happens is when there's lots of little rocks dropped in the pond, and there's loads of little ripples everywhere. That's what makes the biggest impact. Now, how do you do that? Because you can't do that yourself. You can only make, impact from your team, your perspective. But if you inspire others to make the impact just as you're doing, then you're going to end up with multiple ripple effects throughout the pond. Not just one big splash, one huge ripple effect. There's going to be loads and loads of little ones going everywhere. And that's where the big change happens.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about, Alex. When that every interaction counts. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Everything we do, it isn't just about this one time go at something. Every single thing that we do really does make a big difference. So look, on that note, my goodness me, we've talked about all sorts today. Not least how we are potentially being led by clones, but I think we both agree that there are some really lovely green shoots of influencers and people that want to change that moving forwards, and not least that lovely cycle that you shared where the weak have created hard times, which are now currently creating the great leaders of our future. So thank you so much, Alex, for what has been the most incredible conversation today, and helping me celebrate 1 year of Game of Leadership. What an awesome achievement. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you for being there along the way to support as well. Really appreciate it.
Can I just share one thing before we end? Right. Judah Krishnamurti, he said that no one man can change the world, but what he can do is become the beacon of light for the change he wishes to make. And what he means by that is, look, individually, we can't change the world. We can't. But what we can do is become the inspiration for others. And then that makes the change. And now that is true leadership. Yeah. We inspire people to follow us and help us make the change we wish to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. And let's just say that it's not just about the men out there, it's about the women and the men and the girls, the boys, the theys, the he's, the she's, and all of those that are making a difference in this world. And I applaud you and thank you for helping to make our future leaders the best they can be. On that happy note, thank you, Alex. We will see you again soon on Game of Leadership. Take care of yourself.
You too, Paula. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye for now, everyone. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I hope you enjoyed this live episode. It's fun to do things a little bit different from time to time, especially as we were celebrating our first year as a podcast. And we've hit almost 60 episodes in total with all the specials and bits and pieces that have happened along the way. I hope you're enjoying this journey as much as me, and that you continue to listen and gain value, tips and tricks that help support you in your leadership moving forwards. Bye for now, and I'll see you next week.